Water. It is the most important resource for life that we know of. It is so important that it is the first thing scientists look for on other planets. This is California. It has many things, but water is not one of them. We used to have water here, but most of that was brought in from out of state or pumped out of the ground. Unfortunately for the state that I call home, we are running out of options. Things have gotten a little better, but this has essentially nothing to do with human action. The groundwater level has been getting lower and lower, and there's no sign of this reversing anytime soon. How did we get here? Well, obviously we were using water faster than it can be replenished. And there was also some environmental regulations made to protect a non-native species of fish that forced the state to dump a lot of fresh water into the ocean, but neither of these alone, or even together, would have brought California to where it is now. California's water problem is a result of something called the tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of the commons is the economic consequence of a good being publicly distributed at a price below what it's actually worth. And when everyone uses it, it either runs out or becomes worthless. This idea came about during the Middle Ages. Today, we are familiar and comfortable with the idea of privately owned land. But back in the Middle Ages, most land was publicly owned, meaning that anyone could use it. Peasants could grow small amounts of crops for themselves to use or sell, and some would use the land for animal grazing. A frequent problem with this system was people overusing the land. Some people overgrazed the land, leaving little to no grass for anyone else to graze. There was also the problem of letting your animals roam. These animals would frequently encounter someone else's small garden where the plants would either be eaten or trampled. The reason this problem comes up is because there is no incentive to conserve or use less of the public land. In this scenario, the most economically prudent decision is to use as much of the public resource as possible, because there is no cost to you, the user. When land is in private hands, the owner has an incentive to conserve because he can profit from it. Imagine there is a public park with an apple tree, and anyone is allowed to go to this tree and pick apples for free. On the surface, this seems great. It could serve as a source of free and healthy food to the public, especially the homeless. However, the poor and the homeless are not the only ones with an incentive to pick from the tree. If it is publicly owned and anyone can pick from it, then there is little preventing someone who is financially well off from coming in and picking as many apples as he can, and leaving little to no apples for anyone else. Why does this occur? It's because there's no incentive to use less of that resource. These apples are just as free to a rich person as they are to a poor person. So the rich person has just as much incentive to pick apples from this tree as a poor person does. If it costs neither of them anything to overpick the tree, then don't be surprised when that happens. You could try to restrict who can pick apples from the tree, but the means by which you choose to do this will create its own problems. And even if you did find a way to restrict those who can pick from the tree, you still haven't solved the actual problem. All you have done is condense the problem down to a smaller number of people. So then how does one solve the tragedy of the commons? Usually the answer is to privatize the resource. If this tree is owned by an individual, he can choose how he distributes that resource. He can charge a price for the apples that make overpicking less likely to occur. Of course, the issue that comes up with privatizing is that some will go without. But then again, we see the same thing happening when something is publicly owned. But what about California's water problem? When it comes to water, it gets more complicated. It moves on its own, falls from the sky, and mind-bogglingly vast quantities of it comprise these little things we call oceans. What exactly do you privatize when trying to privatize water? Lakes are just repositories from rivers, and rivers are just transportation systems. The issue of water privatization is too big for this video and is a story for another time. But with all other things, privatization is usually the best solution to the tragedy of the commons. And we know this because other attempts have shown to be less than successful. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it, then go ahead and click this annotation to subscribe, and click the bell icon to be notified of when videos come out. Thanks for watching.